Are you looking for an efficient and scalable way of enrolling, managing and securing Windows modern devices within your organization? Well, with SOTI MobiControl and Windows Autopilot, you can achieve exactly that. Hello and welcome to the Windows Modern with SOTI MobiControl series. My name is Richard, and in this video we'll walk through the out-of-box provisioning experience with SOTI MobiControl Cloud and Windows Autopilot. All of the essential settings and device information can be supplied in advance, meaning that when your Windows Modern devices are sent to site for the first time and turned on, they are provisioned within minutes. So let's get started. Firstly, this feature requires the Microsoft Entra ID join option set up within SOTI MobiControl. Now there's a separate video within this series that works through that in a step-by-step way, but as a quick review, this requires a SOTI MobiControl directory connection to Microsoft Entra ID, a SOTI MobiControl enrollment policy that queries Microsoft Entra ID user groups, and then within Microsoft Entra ID, the SOTI MobiControl application added to mobility, MDM and WIP, and the settings for that set up correctly. As Windows Autopilot is about the out-of-box provisioning experience for the device, another prerequisite would be to look at your company branding within Microsoft Entra ID. To do this, you can go to the Microsoft Entra ID overview, go down to company branding, and then select edit. So here you can change a number of various different settings in terms of how you would like your device users to see your devices when they go through those initial setup screens, including basics, layout, header, footer, etc. For this example, I'll just go to sign in form, to sign in page text, and I'll add some custom text that the user will see when they work through the out-of-box provisioning steps. But please refer to the Microsoft help documentation for all the options that are available. I'll then click review and save. To get started, we'll go to SOTI MobiControl, select the menu, and then go to Global Settings. From there, we'll select Services, and then Directory. And as mentioned, this requires the Microsoft Entra ID, or previously Azure AD, Join Cloud Enrollment option set up. You can see this is already here, and if I click on the information, we can see that we have our primary domain, our tenant ID, and our metadata endpoint address already available with this application, linking to our Microsoft Entra ID tenant. As a reminder, this information can be found in the Microsoft Entra ID overview page and in the app registrations area. Given that we already have a connection to our Microsoft Entra ID tenant though, adding the Autopilot connector is very straightforward. I can click the plus button and first give this a name. Once I've added a clear name, I can then select our already existing connection and then choose Microsoft Autopilot from the list of default applications that are available to you within your cloud SOTI MobiControl instance. I'll select this and then click Save. Once we click Save, we can see that there's a successful connection message and we are redirected to Microsoft website to sign in. The individual logging in will need to be an administrator able to accept permissions on behalf of the company. And then when we do sign in as an administrator, we can review the permissions the SOTI MobiControl application is requesting. When we're ready to proceed, we'll click Consent and then Accept. And once we click Accept, we can see a second page where we can see all of the permissions that that default application will require. When I'm ready to proceed, I'll click Accept, and we can now see that the setup is successful and we can return to the SOTI MobiControl directory area. Here we can see our Autopilot directory connection listed along with the previous enrollment option with Microsoft Entra ID. Now that we have this connection, we can see a reference to it in the Entra ID portal. If we go to Enterprise Applications, we can see that the SOTI Autopilot application is added, and this was done when we accepted those permissions a few moments ago. If I click on the application, click on Permissions, I can also see all those permissions reflected within the Entra ID portal as well. Now that we have our connection, we can start considering the provisioning steps for the device themselves. To do this, we can stay within the global settings area, move to Windows and choose the Autopilot option. There are two options here, devices list and deployment profiles. The devices list will allow us to upload a list of devices directly to SOTI MobiControl, which will in turn sync to the Microsoft Entra ID portal, or we can download a list of any devices that are already set up for Autopilot from the Microsoft portal. In our case, we'll upload our devices to SOTI MobiControl. I'll click the plus button and I'm met with the option of uploading a CSV file. Now this CSV file will contain all of the hardware parameters that are required for the devices, and commonly these will be supplied by the device reseller. Tens, hundreds, thousands of hardware IDs can be supplied within one CSV file, uploaded into SOTI MobiControl so those devices can be provisioned really quickly. In my case, I'm using a test device, so I'll need to manually reset it and capture the hardware information. I'll do this now. If, like me, you're manually capturing the hardware ID for a test device, you can see how to do this and all of the other steps that we're working through on the SOTI MobiControl help documentation, which is on SOTI Pulse. For capturing the hardware ID, I can see I need to open a PowerShell terminal as an administrator and use the following commands. So I'll go to my device, run PowerShell as an administrator, and I'll copy and paste those commands in. The first will make a working directory for where we'll be adding our hardware information. We'll then set the location to this folder and allow installed scripts to run to capture our hardware information. We'll run the specific script that we need. And finally, request that the output from that script with the hardware parameters that we need are added to a CSV file added to this folder called Autopilot HWID. Once this is done, we can see that we've successfully gathered details for the device with its relevant serial number, and we should see that that CSV file is in the folder. I'll navigate to the folder location, and there we have our CSV file. I'll copy this, ready to upload to the SOTI MobiControl web console. I'll select the CSV and import the information. Please note, dependent on the size of the file and the number of the devices, it can take some time for the information to be uploaded and synchronized to Microsoft. When this is completed, we will see the devices listed in the screen that we're seeing here. While I'm waiting, I'll factory reset my test device so it will go through the out-of-box experience. Again, these steps of manually capturing the hardware ID and resetting the device are only required if you are using a test device like me. If you are obtaining your devices from a reseller, they will be able to provide you a CSV file of all of the required information. Now that the synchronization is complete, I can see my device listed. And before we move over to our deployment profiles, I'll make sure to assign this device to a security group within Microsoft Entra ID. So this is indicating when the device is provisioned, there will be a reference to this device on whichever security group we select here. I'll say that this device will be added to the front store devices group. Once this is done, we'll move over to our deployment profile. A deployment profile customizes the Autopilot setup experience, including user interaction, account settings, and the device provisioning behavior. You could have one deployment profile for all of your Windows Autopilot devices, or you could have multiple deployment profiles which customize the experience dependent on where the device is within your fleet. I'll set up one to start with a clearly identifiable name. And when I click next, we'll be able to configure the out-of-box settings specific to the devices linked to this deployment profile. We can say the deployment mode, whether this will be user-driven, so if the provisioning option will be driven by the user signing in, or self-deploying. whether the device will be joined directly to Microsoft Entra ID or whether there's a hybrid join option. So for example, if you're using an on-premise directory linked to Microsoft Entra ID, whether the Microsoft license terms or privacy settings will be shown, whether the user will be able to change their account options, whether the user that's being added will be added as a standard user or an administrator, and whether there will be a pre-provisioned deployment. Allow pre-provisioned deployment means that if the devices are purchased directly from the manufacturer can add specific drivers and configurations before the devices are shipped. Now it's worth calling out for deployment mode that we're seeing both of the options that are available with the Microsoft APIs. However, because our enrollment policy in SOTI MobiControl requires a link to the Microsoft Entra ID user groups, we need to select the user-driven option. So we'll select user-driven, keep all of the other settings the same, and click Next. When I click Next, we'll then be able to assign this deployment profile to one or more Microsoft Entra ID security group. We can see the 3 groups that we saw previously, and if I select this one, which is the same that we assigned our device to, it would mean that the device will receive these settings when it goes through the out-of-box provisioning. I'll click Assign. We have a success message, and we now should have everything set up, ready to work through the out-of-box experience on the device side. Now that our device is assigned to a Microsoft security group and we have a deployment profile created that also is assigned to that security group, we can see that the device's profile status says assigned, indicating that there is a link between this device and the deployment profile. So we can now go back to our device, either a factory reset test device or a brand new device shipped by a reseller. Once the device is connected to the internet, it will receive its autopilot configuration from Microsoft, and we're directed to the sign-in page, and we can see that customized message, welcome to Rocket Co sign-in, that we set on the branding screen in Microsoft Entra ID. So let's sign in with our user, and the device should be enrolled into SOTI MobiControl within the sign-in process. We'll be prompted for our SOTI MobiControl enrollment policy pin. To learn more about how the enrollment pin is generated, please refer to our Enroll Windows Modern Devices with Microsoft Entra ID video, and then the terms and conditions from the SOTI MobiControl enrollment policy to review and accept. The device is now set up, and if we go to Access Work or School, we can see that the user is connected to Microsoft Entra ID and the device is managed by SOTI MobiControl. We can now see the device information listed in SOTI MobiControl. Now any profiles, security configurations, applications and more are being provisioned. We can also see reference the device within the security group area of Microsoft Entra ID. If I go to Groups, Security Groups, and select our front store devices, this is where we added and assigned our device a little bit earlier, we can see that there is one device listed, and we can see the information about that specific device. So thank you for joining us in this video where we've reviewed the out-of-box provisioning experience with Windows Autopilot and SOTI MobiControl Cloud. We've reviewed the steps of how to add the Autopilot directory connection, created a deployment profile, and seen the device-side enrollment experience. Tens, hundreds, thousands of devices can be added in bulk before they are sent to their end location and turned on for the first time. And combined with VPN, security profiles, lockdown, enterprise browser configuration, application provisioning, real-time device tracking, and advanced diagnostics, these devices are quickly provisioned for your mission-critical environments. For more resources, like and subscribe to the SOTI YouTube channel, and for more information about the SOTI One platform, visit soti.net.